Why did you stop seeing him?
He was getting too fond of me.
Are you sure you weren't getting too fond of him? Answer me. I want to know the truth. I want to know why he hanged himself.
He was being blackmailed.
That's why he stole?
Yes.
Someone found out he was a homosexual and blackmailed him?
That's it.
That was a clip from Victim. It's a film from 1961, and it was the first English-language film to use the word homosexual. It was actually refused a seal of approval from the American Motion Picture Production Code. It eventually premiered in the US in 1962, but Time magazine heavily criticized it, saying that its approval of homosexuality as a practice was offensive. I want you to think about all the LGBT people that you see on TV and in movies these days. Then, I want you to go back and think about the LGBT people in movies and TV in the past. There's a difference, isn't there? When it comes to TV, which is what I'm mostly going to focus on in this video, there's a difference in the number of LGBT series regulars if you compare today's data to 10 years ago. It has improved. It's actually the highest percentage of LGBTQ series regulars GLAAD has ever found, but it's still a small percentage, and many LGBTQ characters still fall into outdated stereotypes or harmful tropes. Now let's get more specific. Here are the basics. The L in LGBT stands for lesbian, as in a homosexual woman. Despite the amount of lesbians on scripted shows on broadcast networks, cable, and streaming platforms, there are still many tropes that these characters fall into. We'll go into that later. The G stands for gay, as in homosexual. It can be used as an umbrella term of sorts, like how a lesbian is also gay, but in this case it refers specifically to men since lesbian is already counted in the acronym. Here's some data about how they're represented on television. The B stands for bisexual. The accepted definition by most is that bisexuals feel attraction for both men and women, but recently, more people have started to define bisexuality as attraction for one's own gender and then one other. The main idea here is that bisexuals aren't straight and they aren't gay, they're bisexual. Their representation is often lacking in exchange for the same cliches over and over again. The T stands for transgender, as in when one's gender does not match the gender that they were assigned at birth. Transgender characters are least represented on television. In fact, last year there were no transgender regular or recurring characters on scripted broadcast programming. Sometimes you'll see LGBT written with a Q. That stands for queer, which is essentially both an umbrella term for all non-straight orientations, and also a word for people who decide not to use any sort of specific label. Queer also used to be a slur, and is still considered by many to be one, so you have to be careful with it. Sometimes you'll see LGBT written with a plus, which is meant to include any orientation or identity that doesn't fit into those 4 letters. Other times, it's written without a plus or a Q, and everything that doesn't fit is just implied. Now let's talk about tropes. A trope is something you see a lot of in television and movies, like a cliche. A well-known trope is the bury your gays trope, which is when a lesbian or gay character dies for no solid reason, and it's usually done by showrunners with the intention of furthering a straight character's storyline. A well-known example of this is Lexa from The 100 on the CW. After her death, fans raised over $160,000 for the Trevor Project, an organization that focuses on suicide prevention among LGBT youth. Another trope is the portrayal of bisexuality as a villainous trait rather than a lived identity. Bisexuals are consistently depicted as unfaithful, or their bisexuality is used to show a lack of commitment or point to immaturity. There's also the well-known gay best friend trope, which is exactly what it sounds like. Gay characters, usually teenagers or young adults, are treated more as an accessory than a person.
Your very own homosexual!
A study from 2015 found that a positive relationship existed between exposure to on-screen gay characters and gay equality endorsement. Many people tend to be homophobic or transphobic because they aren't familiar with the LGBT community, or they don't know anybody who is queer or trans. Because of this uncertainty, the parasocial contact hypothesis states that anxiety and hostility, such as homophobia or transphobia, that act as barriers to intergroup contact could be removed if the majority group, straight or cisgender people, experiences intergroup contact vicariously rather than in person. Basically, seeing LGBT people on television and in movies helps get rid of the unfamiliarity and uncertainty, especially for people who do not know any LGBT people in real life. So, how does this connect to real life? According to GLAAD's Accelerating Acceptance Survey, from 2014 to 2015, there was a decrease in non-LGBT people who felt uncomfortable about issues such as seeing a same-sex couple holding hands, or learning a family member is LGBT. The thing is, people who lack other sources of information heavily rely on the things they see on TV or other forms of media to form their opinion. So, positive LGBT representation causes people to be more accepting of LGBT people in real life. However, the tropes that are still present in media cause people to have a warped view of queer and trans people in real life. Even LGBT people themselves can see these tropes and believe that they have to live up to these sometimes harmful stereotypes. For sources and to research more about this, check the video description.
You
talking about, being gay, whether the movie could have been made 10 years ago. And I can't help but think about just simply 20 years ago, how radical it was for an actor to play a gay person. When River Phoenix was in My Own Private Idaho, this is not a movie about a war, a secret, top secret war guy. This is just about a young kid who wants to be gay. It was radical that he was doing that. I was his age and his contemporary, and it was like, people will think you're gay, dude. You can't do that. Your career will be over. And
I think there's a vestige of that still.